Good afternoon, everybody. Well, I should say good morning. It feels afternoon, doesn't it? But welcome to the TechEd session that's going to be focusing on delivering KPIs with Microsoft SQL Server, Analysis Services, and BISM. Really long title, doesn't rhyme. I heard someone entering in the room before. It's the session's about KPIs and BI. It almost sounded like almost a rap, almost. My name's Miles Matheson. I'm a solutions specialist for application platforms. So I predominantly work with customers around SQL Server. And I particularly work around BI. In fact, I have a big background in BI, and I'm very passionate about business intelligence. Today's session is a 200-level session, so I just wanted to sort of just highlight what that means. For the next 60 minutes, I'm going to take you through analysis services, reporting services, performance points, Power Pivot, and Power View. So it's a massive, massive session, a lot to get through. So obviously I'm not going to be doing massive amounts of code, but I'm going to take you through the key concepts of how this technology works. So what's the agenda about today? Well, obviously I'm going to be doing lots of demos, but what I want to do is I want to just take you through the premise of how to deliver meaningful business intelligence back to business users. Now, I'm actually running a session that's been covered in way more detail in the States by the name of a guy by Peter Myers. Now his session is actually available on a webcast, so if you want to go and check out some of the technology that I'm showing you in more detail, please feel free to do that. It's a lot longer. It's about 75 minutes to cover the same content. So before I get started, I thought it would be a good idea just to define what a KPI is. So before I get started, how many of you have actually using KPIs today? Right, for those of you who didn't put your hands up, I bet you've got KPIs, okay? So let's just talk about what a KPI is. A KPI is a key performance indicator. It's a quantifiable and measurable measurement for gauging a business objective. The KPIs were a massive rage in the early days of BI, particularly around concepts such as business scorecarding or balanced scorecarding. And if you want to read a lot more about how to deploy and develop KPIs from a business perspective, I recommend that you have a look at anything on balanced scorecarding. It's absolutely something to drill down on. Now, this definition I've pulled out is actually from TechEd online. So you'll find a lot of concepts documented on the Microsoft Online documentation. So let's just drill down on what a KPI's got technically. Well, the first thing is a base value, okay? That's the value that we're measuring against. The second thing that a KPI is made up of is a target value. Now, these two things come back with a differentiator. Am I on track for my budget? Have I met my commitments? The last element of a KPI is what we call a threshold, an indicator of whether we're trending upwards or downwards. Now, I'm going to take you through how to create KPIs and deliver KPIs in a meaningful way back to the business users. So before I do that, let's just give some context of all the technology, because there's a lot of technology I'm going to show you today. So the first thing I'm going to do is just highlight that most of the stuff I'm showing you today is using SQL Server 2012. And essentially we're using analysis services, reporting services, Power View, and Power Pivot. All of these are technologies that are enabled by using SQL Server Enterprise and BI Edition. Of course, SQL Server also comes with ETL tools for you to be able to extract that data and transform it to support your KPIs. You also have the ability to use technology such as data quality services for handling dirty data that you might need to clean up to be able to make that measurable and verifiable for the business. Now, the stuff that I'm going to show you today about how to present it back to business users is going to be predominantly using the Microsoft Office technology. That's SharePoint 2010 and Microsoft Office 2010. And I'm really hoping today that I have enough time to show you the next version of Office and show you how some of the stuff's converging all in one spot. Okay, so before I go down too much further, let's just talk a little about what analysis services is. How many people are using analysis services? All right, keep your hands up if you're using 2012. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right. Those of you that are looking at using analysis services, Analysis of 2012 has got some interesting capabilities building on top of the vision for analysis services. So when I started doing business intelligence, analysis services was all about creating high-performing environments for writing queries and getting information back. It's also about constructing data sets in a way that business users thought about data. So rather than presenting a really complex data structure, I would dimensionalize data. I would take data and group them up into attributes, and then I would create fact tables or tables that are at a transaction level of the measures that I want to measure. Now, what's really exciting about analysis services is that technology has continued to be built out and actually is taking on some new paradigms around presenting information back to business users. And that's this idea of the business intelligence semantic model. Now, what's interesting about the BI semantic model is it's actually taking the premise around analysis services a little bit further. It's making it a lot easier for business users to be able to write queries against data that may not be multidimensional, it may be relational, it may be tabular. So the BISM is a really exciting piece of technology that's available with SQL Server 2012. Now, Nick Draper is actually delivering a session detailing the differences between the details between tabular and OLAP models within analysis services, and that's on later today, and I strongly recommend you go and have a look at that session. I have the session numbers and stuff at the back of this at the end. So let's just talk about why we want to look at the BI semantic model for a moment. The BI semantic model is that one-stop shop for all of your reporting. The intention of this technology is to give a consistent, reliable way for your business users to, I've never seen someone come into the room with some foam rubber before. Hi, good stuff. Consistent experience for business users. So the whole idea about that is that you have one place to write your reporting, your analytics, your scorecards, and your dashboards. And it's for all users. It's for users that are doing personal BI, that's taking data and building their own models, maybe sharing that with other users, to team BI, where you're actually creating an experience for other business users to collaborate and make decisions, all the way through to corporate BI. That's that BI that's trusted, cleaned, managed business intelligence that's then published up and used for key main decisions. Now, analysis services has really had some major investments in this area of the BI semantic model for 2012. We've got the new version of Power Pivot for Excel, and I'm going to show you some of that today in action. It's also given a set of new tools for developers to create and actually reuse some of the Power Pivot models that are being built and present them in a much more operational or corporate way. And of course, we've got the Management Studio tools, which give you much more capability of monitoring and seeing what the performance metrics are of that environment. So I just wanted to cover this one other topic off before I start going off and doing lots of demonstrations. The first thing I want to talk about is this concept of self-service business intelligence. Self-service BI is the concept where business users are actually creating business intelligence content that may be outside of the traditional data assets that you've created, like the data warehouse. The reality is today, business users do this. When you look at all the reporting technology that's in the market today, there's one single feature that's available across all of those tools. Can anyone answer that? What that feature is across all reporting tools? Excel, absolutely. And you're the first person that I'm going to give a prize away to. Excel, export out to Excel is absolutely the common feature. And what's happening is business users are actually taking data and transforming it out to Excel and actually developing new insights, maybe even developing new KPIs to prove how they're, to support their decision-making process. I'm going to give you an exam voucher, by the way, if that's all right. So let's come up and see me at the end. So if you think about that, that creates a really interesting situation for us as BI professionals. How do we guarantee the single version of the truth? How do we make sure that our data warehouse that we've built is not being corrupted by this self-service business intelligence paradigm that is already happening? Well, the way to do that is categorize your data assets. And I'm just going to give you the framework that I've been using with some customers, and it's predominantly around categorizing the quality of the asset that's been created. So, for example, the data warehouse, that's what I'd call a golden asset, an asset that is managed by the BI team or the IT team. It's supported. You want to make a change to that baby, that's a change control, my friend, because the CFO uses that for board reporting. So no one's going to be changing that. Likewise, with your reporting assets, you want to do the same thing. So all the reports that come out of the data warehouse that are designed by the BI team, managed by the BI team, they're supported by the BI team. But the business users that are going creating their own content, their own self-service content, you still want to enable that. You still want to support that. So what you could do is you could create an environment where they're able to create content, publish it, and actually have it peer-reviewed by another trained analyst. So you might have a finance analyst that is trained on doing self-service business intelligence, maybe using technology like Power Pivot to take data from the data warehouse and other data sources, integrate it. There are seats down the back, so please feel free to come on down through there. More than welcome, just go down the aisle there. And if you actually do that and you actually say, well, okay, this is a team BI, someone's created some content for other users to use, as long as we state that this is a silver class asset, an asset that's been peer reviewed, it's not supported by the BI team, it's not owned by the BI team, it's owned by that business user that's created that content, you can actually see the difference. You actually understand that team BI data, even though it might be validated, it's still not the golden single version of the truth. That's from the data warehouse. And of course, personal BI, you still want to give business users the ability to do that. And the way to do that is give them a place again to publish content out, but categorize it like something like bronze. In other words, it's not data that's been tested by anyone. It's a model that someone's created, and it's a use at your own risk. Now, all the research shows that if you take this kind of approach of categorizing the kind of reporting, the kind of KPIs that are being built, the kind of data assets that are being built, business users can still make decisions because they can understand the completeness and the validity of the data. Where it goes wrong is when you don't do that categorization. So I'm going to show you a lot of this in action today. I'm going to show you analysis services. I'm going to show you Power Pivot for Excel, Power Pivot for SharePoint, all interacting together. One last thing I want to just touch on with the tools. Power Pivot for Excel is really designed for power users, business analysts that are used to doing Excel, that are power users in Excel, to be able to prototype and build models for specific business purposes. These models may not be necessarily needing to be in the data warehouse. They can be used to prototype what goes into the data warehouse. They can be used to validate metrics and KPIs as part of your development process. They're very good for creating solutions that are short-term, short-lived, that you may want to productionize in the data warehouse if they're successful. The BI Development Studio is about building applications that are managed and supported, that they're backed up, they've got source control, they're hopefully using something like TFS to manage the code management, and you've got a lot of policies and procedures around how that content is published and managed and supported by the Development Studio. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to take you through analysis services and Power Pivot, and I'm going to give you an idea around how we can go and create some KPIs. So let me just switch over to my VM here. Now, what I've got here is an analysis services cube. But before I jump into that, I just want to talk a little bit about how business users consume information. Business users are not going to be going and creating analysis services cubes. They're not going to be building that kind of thing. They're predominantly going to be using tools such as Excel or reporting technology like reporting services or PowerView. And they'll be doing it for specific business purposes. Now, what I've got here is I've got an application that I've written in Excel using Power Pivot. It's taking data from a data warehouse. It's a sales analysis dashboard that I've created. I can see the performance of my products. I can see what my top sellers are, who my top sales reps are. I can see how my orders are going, so trending upwards. And I can see how good my promotions are. Now, as a business owner, let's just say I'm head of sales. One of the things that I want to do is I want to actually set some new targets for my sales team. So what I need is someone to build an analysis services cube or an environment for me to be able to actually capture that KPI or that base measure for the KPI, which is quota. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to show you how easy it is to build a cube to capture quota and then actually publish that KPI out for business users and the sales reps to be able to consume. Right, so let's just get straight into analysis services. So what I've got here is I've got Visual Studio, and this is the Business Intelligence Development Studio. It has gone through a name change. It's with the new version of SQL Server 2012. Now, what you see here is actually the cube design, but let me just take you through how that design works. So first off, when I'm actually creating a cube from scratch, I have to define the database. So the database name is actually what business users will be connecting to it. So I'm actually calling it the sales planning cube. I then actually define the data source that I'm connecting to. So in this case, I'm connecting back to my data warehouse because I'm pulling all my actuals information out of the data warehouse. I then go and define this what we call a data source view, and this is actually defining all the relationships between the tables that I'm pointing against for the analysis services cube. This is actually a really powerful area. There's one tip that I wanted to give you. If you were building an analysis services cube today and something was going wrong in your development cycle, this is the first place that things would go wrong. If you don't get the relationships right in here, or the tables do not handle all the cardinality and the data in the right way, then you're going to have errors during the build of the cube. And that's one of the things about analysis services. It's not very forgiving if your data is not well structured. Okay, so analysis services, is, particularly the OLAP side, is about structured data, and that's why star schemas and multidimensional models are actually the best place for building cubes against. So what you can see here is I've got two fact tables. I've got the sales quota fact table that has been created here, and I've got the reseller sales table. I have an employee dimension that has another dimension called sales territory that relates to it. And you would have seen those dimensions in my report that I showed earlier. And I've got an aggregate dimension called dim month. Now, what I want to do is I actually want to create a cube structure that makes it easy for me to do my planning, and also I want to create a KPI with the planning that I'm working on. So I've created what we call measure groups. These are actually relating to those two fact tables as I was showing you earlier in the data view. And so what I've done through the wizard is I've actually gone and created created a measure called sales quota, and I've created a measure called sales amounts and extended amount. Now these are measures that users could use in their reports, and they can interact via the dimensions that I've created. And I've created very basic dimensions for the sales cube. So I've got an employee dimension, and it's got a whole series of attributes around employee. I've got a time dimension that's got a whole lot of attributes around time, but I've also created what we call a hierarchy within that dimension. So the hierarchy is a great way of grouping attributes that give business users a path for navigating the data. Right, let's just have a look at how the dimensions and fact tables relate to each other. So if my cube was a little bit bigger, let's just say I had more dimensions, this would be the view that would show all the dimensions and how they relate to the fact tables and measure groups. This is what we call conforming dimensions. So I've got a lot of conformality in my cube here. So obviously the employee dimension and date dimension relate to both fact tables. And I'm also able to pick how those tables relate to each other. So I'm able to say which key is being used, what kind of relationship is being used to marry up the dimension with the measure. Also have the ability to do calculations in the cube. And this is one of the things that I've actually not included in today's session because the things I want to show is going to take too much time. But what I'm able to do here is I'm actually able to create calculations around the data that's in the attributes and in the cube. And what's interesting about calculations is I can handle things such as semi-additive and non-additive data. So if I've got data that doesn't add up consistently, or maybe I want to take the last last measure from the month or something like that, I would do that within calculations. I would create a series of calculations to do that within this plane. But as I said today, is about KPIs. So the first place I'm going to show you where you can create KPIs is within analysis services. Now this is really where you've got a well understanding of what your KPI is. Okay, so I know what my target is going to be. I know what my value is. Hopefully it's coming from a consistent data source. In this case, it's coming from the data warehouse. And what I've got here is I've got a value expression where I want to return a percentage to be able to track it against my target. So what I'm doing here is I'm taking the sales amount from my measure group from reseller sales, and I'm taking my sales quota amounts and dividing them by each other and timesing it by 100 for me to return a percentage value. I've also put in here a goal expression. Now this could be from the data warehouse. I might have my budgets in there, for example, if I wanted to. But in this particular instance, I'm actually doing a hard-coded value. Now, what I've got here is that will actually tell me what the status is. It'll tell me whether I'm on target or not. And I have the ability to say what kind of status indicator I have available. Now, what's interesting about this is that this is not actually returning an image. It's actually just a text field or a text attribute that's returned back for the reporting tool to interpret what that image is. Okay, so I'm just giving a bit of a lead here, saying that I want it to be shapes. I can do traffic lights, road signs if I want to. I've also got a calculation here that's been put in here. Now, for those of you who know MDX, this is probably pretty easy for you to get into. But if you're new to MDX and you want to get started in creating KPIs in analysis services, it's very easy. There's a set of templates that are available for you to actually experiment with and work with and use as a base. This is a calculation that's basically saying if the KPI is less than or equal to the sales attainment, the KPI goal, then return a value. And this is the value that we would use to say what the trend indicator would be. So whether it's going up or down or to side. So you can see I've got my trend arrow here as well. So the other thing that you'll see with the trend expression, which is the expression below, is it's now giving me the ability to compare trends via time. So what I'm doing here is I'm using my time dimension, which is the month dimension that I've created, and it's specifying which members I want to be able to do that comparison for that trend. So in this particular instance, what I'm saying is I'm using a function called parallel period, which is a standard function in MDX that will actually give me the ability to compare based on the hierarchy that I've defined in my time dimension. So remember I created that time hierarchy that I was talking about, the ability to navigate via year, quarter, and month if I wanted to. This hierarchy is what I'm using to dictate where the trend status and arrow is. Before I go off and deploy my cube, I just want to talk a little about the write-back features with analysis services. Now, what's great about this cube is I can now use this as a way of capturing data for creating quota. So I've got my quota table that I'd created earlier. What I'm able to do now is I'm actually able to enable that as a data source for storing quota. The way to do that is I just right-mouse click on the partition, click on write-back settings, and it's something that I should just highlight with write-back settings. The first thing is write-back can only work on aggregative values, so it can only work on things like sum. If you've got that semi-additive and non-additive calculations we're talking about, this is not the place to try and use write-back. It's got some very simple technology in it for capturing the data, and the kind of smarts you want to do around profiling data and so on, that can happen in the client tool. And I'm going to show you that in a minute. So let's just go and deploy our cube. So while this is deploying, now this is a very simple cube that I've created. Now, some customers build really comprehensive analysis services cubes. They have lots of dimensions, lots of fact tables, lots of attributes. And for a business user, that can be quite daunting. So one of the things you're actually able to do is use perspectives. Now, perspectives are ways of actually being able to specify what business users see. So you're actually able to create, a sales planning perspective that restricts just the number of measures and the number of dimensions that business user is seeing when they connect to that cube. It's a great way of simplifying the experience and giving a business user an experience that's fit for the task and activity that they're working on. So our cube has now been deployed, and it's been deployed successfully. So what I want to do is I just want to show you what that looks like in Excel. So let's just go and open up a new workbook. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to use the standard data connection capabilities of Excel 2010. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to connect to our Excel, to our analysis services cube directly. So the way I'll do that is I'll just click on the data tab, and I'm going to click on other data sources and select analysis services. So at this point it's now asking me for the server name that I published my cube to. So I'm just going to go back to my little cheat sheet here and pull that through. Click next. Now it's going to show me the cubes that are available on that server. So actually this is an example where you can see a base cube and some of those perspectives that I was talking about earlier. But I just want to show you the cube that I created. Let's go to my sales planning cube. Click next. Now what's going to happen is I'm actually going to save this data source connection for later. And so if I want to reconnect to that cube connection that I've got, that's actually stored in the file system for me to use in other workbooks and also within this workbook if I want to. So I'm just going to create a pivot table, just do a standard one here. Just put it in the center of the screen here. And what you can see is I've got all the measures that have been created in my analysis services cube. You can see the KPI that I created. In fact, let's just have a look at that KPI in action. So I'll just drop down the goal and status. Sorry, no goal, status and trends. And then we just pull in the fiscal quarter. Let's just put fiscal year up there. And, sorry, let me just select, because I've put it in a hierarchy, let's select 2008. And then we just bring in those employees. Let's just go and have a look at these employees now. So what you can see here is, if I just actually move that 2008 down over here. Well, you can, yeah, let me just, knew I'd done that wrong. Let me just select 2008. So what you can see here is the trend over time. Now that trends indicator that I created is now comparing the quarter prior, and that's what's dictating the arrow going up. Now Excel has chosen the images that are being brought back via the indicators that we picked within the analysis services cube. Now what I want to do now is I just want to show you that write back feature really quickly. So one of the things that we're able to do with that analysis services cube is we can actually use that to capture and plan data. And it's very, very simple. Once you've created your fact table or your table structure that you want to capture the data in within either your data warehouse or within a reporting database, you're able to actually point analysis services against that and enable the write back feature against that cube, which is what I did earlier. But to actually use it is the best place to do it is within Excel. So let's just again go back to my data source connection that I've created earlier. I'm going to use the one that we've got in the workbook. And I'm just going to go over to the data tab again. And what you'll see is I've got the ability to, sorry, I lost my, just trying to get to the, right. So what you can see is that when I actually select the pivot table, I've got the ribbons updated with all the options for formatting the pivot table. And you'll see something really interesting. You'll see this. You'll see a whole lot of options around working with analysis services. So I've got the ability to work with the ILAP cube. I'm able to do an offline ILAP cube for the Excel spreadsheet. I'm taking some data that I'm working with on the analysis services. I'm also able to enable what-if analysis, and this is a really handy tool for us working with the data that I want to do planning with. So let's just go and enable the what-if analysis. And let me just pull through from the fact table for sales quota, just drop that in. And I'm also just going to pull in my, my hierarchy again. This time I'm just going to put in quota across the top there. I'm actually going to select 2009. And you can see it's going to return 0 values. Now what I want to do here is I actually just want to go to pivot table options and click display and show items with no data for rows and columns. So now this is going to pull through all the data, show empty rows. Now what I want to do is I actually want to do some planning for my employees, particularly my sales team. So I'm just going to drop in the sales rep name. And what I'm able to do now is I'm actually able to enter values into the cube via this mechanism. So what I could do here is I could put it 1200. I can format this obviously. Maybe I should have formatted in the cube. But let's just change the number format to dollars just to make it easier for other users to look at. Let's put in another value here. Now what this is doing is it actually hasn't written this back to analysis services yet. So if I want to take these values and write this back to analysis services, I'm able to do that through the what if feature. So what I can do here is I can go and recalculate the pivot table with the changes if I wanted to. So if I had actuals and I wanted to reshow those KPIs, I can do that. Or I can actually automatically calculate the changes as I'm entering them in. I can also publish these changes now back to analysis services. So when I click publish, that number now those numbers are now being exposed back to the analysis services cube, and it's now bringing that data back. Now you would have seen that the total's updated when I did that publish. What that's done is it's actually written that records back to the write back partition in analysis services, which refers back to a write back table that I've got in my database. And because it's using a model to be able to return that data back straight away, other users can see that. Now when I actually write that information down, when I write it back to the database, it's actually capturing a whole lot of other metadata behind the scenes. It's actually capturing the time they entered the data in, it's capturing the version and the name of the person who entered it in. So all that telemetry is built in with the write back feature of analysis services. And with Excel 2010, it's a really interesting feature for doing planning and creating the goals for your KPIs. Right, let me just close that. Okay. So I want to just cover off reporting services for a minute. Now, reporting services had a huge amount of capability built into it with SQL Server 2012. Power View is the new capability that comes with reporting services, and it's a data visualization tool that is highly, it's metadata driven from a perspective that business users are actually guided through the data using the BI semantic model. So it's not a tool for going and creating calculations or creating complex reports. It's a data discovery tool, and it's designed for data to be presentation ready at all times. We also created a whole series of capabilities with SharePoint, and we've built on end user alerting, and we've also created a lot more capabilities around integration with SharePoint, particularly around backup and recovery and cross-farm reporting. But I just wanted to come back to Analysis Services Reporting Services 2008 R2. There are some great features in reporting, in Report Builder, Reporting Services, Report Designer that give you the ability to create and publish KPIs. In fact, one of the things you're able to do is you're actually able to create a KPI in a Reporting Services report. And I'm just going to show you some of that in a minute. You also have the ability to handle geospatial information as well. Now, reporting services is really quite a vast set of tools, and I just wanted to cover who would be using which tool just for a minute. Report Designer is really our sophisticated design tool within Visual Studio. You know those gold class reports that I was talking about before? There might be some comprehensive functionality or interactivity you want to build. Report Designer is the place to do that. We've built it in Visual Studio, so you can do all that code management that I talked about earlier. You've also, at the other end, you've got Power View. Now, Power View is really designed for business users that aren't report writers, and I'm going to show you some of that interaction in a moment today. And it's really a visual tool. It's interactive, and it's really a presentation tool of data visually. Report Builder, which is the tool I'm about to show you now, is really a tool that's designed for business analysts and report writers that are not necessarily report developers. So they're given a tool that's really designed to give business users a way of interacting, business users a way of authoring really nice, rich reports in a flexible layout, but is not as comprehensive as Report Designer. So let's just go and have a look at some of that in action. Okay. So this is Report Designer. Now, one of the things that's interesting about Report Designer is it's a click once application. So when you open it up, you can install it from your central server, your reporting services server, or your SharePoint server, and you're able to just basically create create highly polished reports in a way that when you're designing them, what you're seeing is what you get. So it's a WYSIWYG type designer. So what I'm showing you here, this is the report that I created earlier. When I actually run this report, it's going to look like this. Now, the other thing that's really interesting about reporting services, and particularly Report Builder, is you have the ability to use what we call report parts. Now, report parts are a gallery or a library of data visualizations, calculations, logos that you can reuse in other reports. So if you've got reports that you've created using reporting services and you want to reuse some of the content in those reports, you can do that with the report part gallery. So here's my report that I've created, a real quick cube. What I've done here, it's a really quick report. I've actually drawn a status indicator onto the sales attainment that I'm bringing through. And I have the ability to change that indicator and specify the bandings, the states. I'm able to set the levels just as I could within analysis services. But the difference here is that I'm actually setting the bounding, the bands, without having to necessarily write an MDX function to do that or an MDX code to do that. So in some instances, it could be, could be a good solution. Does anyone see what the disadvantage of that would be? Anyone got an idea what a disadvantage would be? Yep. No, the report parts are embedded in the report, but there is another reason. So the KPI has been created in the reporting services report, but it's just in that report. Very good. Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to give you a prize as well. I'm an exam voucher as well. I'll let you come up and see me after that. So the disadvantage of this approach is if I create a reporting services report and I embed the KPIs in there, I can't reuse them for other business users to use, right? And so if I put it on one place and I move it to another place, they could get out of sync. Performance? No, the performance, there's no performance implications for it is ad hoc, you're absolutely right. So what I'm saying is it's not centrally managed. So analysis services, it is centrally managed. The KPIs are stored within one spot. So let's just quickly run that. So this is a very basic report. Oh, damn. Okay. Moving right along. So what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to bring all of this together, and I want to show you Power View and how we can actually display some of the information. Now, Power View does not have the capability to display KPIs right now. That's not what Power View is about. So Power View is about being presentation ready at all times. That means that when you're writing and working with Power View, you're interacting with the BI semantic model, and the formatting's already taken care of. You're also not writing queries. You're basically generating a report through clicks. Now, what's also interesting about Power View is that the customers that have been working with it are finding that it's a great way of doing collaborative decision making. So when someone's looking at a particular KPI or they want to do some analysis and drill down on that KPI, they might create a report just dedicated to understanding how that works. Then they'll publish that report for other users to interact with. So I'm going to show you that in a moment. The other thing about Power View is it's integrated with SharePoint 2010. So the stuff that we actually build with build with Power View today is actually available through SharePoint for other users to work with. And in fact, the client to build reports in Power View is embedded in SharePoint. So it's an online tool for building reports. I'm going to show quite a few different things with Power View in a moment, but one of the things that really excites me about it is the filtering and interactivity around the reports. So let's just get straight into it. So I'm back in Excel again, and this is actually my planning tool that I've created, and my planning dashboard. And what I want to do here is I actually want to use the data that's in here for my sales team to actually interact with and work with. So let's just have a look at what Power Pivot's doing as opposed to analysis services. So the first thing I want to do is I actually want to go and create a KPI. So I showed you how to create a KPI in analysis services. Let's have a look at how we can create a KPI in Power Pivot with the intention to publish it for other users to use. So what I've got here is I've got a data model that is very similar to the data model analysis services. What I've done here is I've pointed Power Pivot at SQL Server and against the data warehouse. I've brought in all of my dimensions and fact tables that I want to work with. And Power Pivot's actually identified the relationships between them. Now I could have different data sources. So I might have a planning system and I might have a sales system. I could use Power Pivot to prototype this environment if I wanted to. I could basically point to those two systems and build a prototype and infer the relationships between them. What Power Pivot doesn't do is it doesn't have the write back capabilities of analysis services with the analysis services cube that I was showing you earlier. Let's just go back to going and creating a KPI. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go into my sales quota table, and what I want to do here is I actually want to calculate the attainment, the sales attainment versus quota for my sales team. So the first thing I'm going to do, and I know it's going to sound unusual, but I'm going to use an aggregation function to summarize the sales quota. This is just something that I use as a base measure for my KPI. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to use this new capability with Power Pivot, this calculation area down the bottom here. So I'm just going to go and select that area. And I'm going to go auto sum. So what this is doing now is it's just creating a measure, and this measure is what I'll be using for my attainment calculation. Let's actually just call that. Let's just clean up the name of that because it looks a bit naff. Now the next thing I'm going to do before I The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go and create another measure that I'm going to use for my KPI. So unlike analysis services, I have to define my measures first before I can go and create the KPI. So let's just go and do that. Just call it sales target. Now what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to actually create a KPI. So what you can see at the top there now is that the create KPI icon is highlighted. So I cannot create a KPI until I've created those two measures. So let's just go and create the KPI. So let's go and click on that. So when I click on this, I'm now presented with a new interface for me to be able to interact with and create my KPI. So what you can see is that my base measure that I want to use, the one I want to compare with, is the measure I've selected, the sales, so total sales. I should actually have renamed it total sales. And what I want to do is I want to compare it against my sales quota. So when I click sales quota now, what it's going to do is very basic measure. It's basically just doing the differences, but dividing those two and returning a percentage. What I'm able to do now, once I've selected that, is I'm able to actually define the banding for what success looks like. So I can say success looks like 90% of target means that I'm green, 48% is bad. I also have the ability to, again, pick the different icons that I want to display, and again, Excel will use those. If I select a target structure that's got 4 icons, for example, I'll have 4 bands to work with. Now, it is a lot simpler to create the KPIs, but remember, analysis services has got way more flexibility with MDX around how you manage the goal value and status. Also, the ability to fill out descriptions. Now, I'm a big fan of metadata. Metadata is really important. When you're creating reports or you're creating analysis services cubes or even creating Power Pivot cubes, really should be documenting what you're putting together. This is another way of reducing the complexity of interacting with the data assets that you're creating. Just imagine that the business user that you're working with, or who's actually consuming the report that you're building, never seen any data before in their lives. That's the kind of descriptions you want to be putting into your metadata. This would obviously be the descriptions that we would see if we hovered over as a tooltip. So what you can see now is that's highlighted as a KPI. Very simple. Let's just go back and click Save for a minute. Just waiting for that to catch up. Now what I want to do is I just want to show you that KPI working. So the best place for me to do that is, again, insert a pivot table. Now this is using the insert pivot table function in Power Pivot. So you wouldn't want to go, well, you can do, but the easiest way is to actually go from this tile, this ribbon menu here. So let's just click in the existing worksheet. And now what you'll see under Fact Quota is my KPI has been created. It's got an icon next to it. You'll also see that my sales amounts for quota has got a measure attribute indicator against it. So now what I want to do is I just want to pull in sales target. And it's saying everyone's green at the moment. Let's pull in those employees. So we'll just pull in the full name here. And we can see how well everyone is for the full amounts. Let's just make it a little bit more interactive. So one of the things I'm going to do is pull in my from my date dimension. Let's just pull in the some fiscal information. In fact, I want to make that a filter. So let's make that a slicer. And I'll also just pull in the employee name as a horizontal slicer. Oops. So now I've got an application that I can use to see how well I'm doing by sales rep and by time. And indeed, I can put in quarter. And I could publish this up to SharePoint for other business users to interact with, indeed for my sales team. But what I want to do now is I'm actually going to publish the Power Pivot model that I've created up to SharePoint and actually create a Power View report for the individual sales reps to interact with. So the way I'm going to do this, before I do this, I actually just want to show you something that I've done with the Power Pivot model. So I'm just going to click over to the employee dimension for a minute. Now, Power Pivot is really interesting tool, really interesting set of technology. One of the things that's very interesting about it is that you can actually rename the data, hide the complexity of the data away from the business users, and indeed you can actually create calculations using standard Excel functionality to not only lock the calculations away, but keep them in a secured place for other users. And one of the things that I've done in this particular instance is I've actually gone and created a calculation for pulling out a picture of the employees. Now, you might ask, why have I done this? There's lots of different choices around storing images. You can store it as a binary data attribute within your database. You can pull that through and expose it. But you might have a set of images stored on a central website, maybe SharePoint or another system you want to pull through. So what I'm doing here is I'm constructing a URL here to pull back an image of the employee based on their ID. The other thing that I've done is I've actually turned on some special features around Power Pivot that we hide away. And if you want to create a better experience for business users to write queries against your Power Pivot model that you've created, the best thing to do is switch to advanced mode. So when you switch to advanced mode, you're actually exposed with a whole lot of new capabilities. One of the things I'm able to do is I'm able to say that calculation that I've constructed is now a URL. So when tools like Power Pivot sees that URL, it'll expose it back as a picture rather than sending back a clear piece of text. I'm also able to do things with the actual table itself. So for Power Pivot, for example, for Power View, I can say in Power Pivot, what are the base fields when I double click on the table and bring it through? What's the default behavior? I can set that up within this screen here. I'm also able to set up the default behavior of the actual table itself. That's the sorting and order of that when Power View users are using it. So it's a very, very powerful tool for prototyping that semantic model that I was talking about. You'll also notice there's another icon there, that concept of perspectives. So that's also now within Power Pivot. So I'm actually able to create a perspective and restrict what people are seeing against the model that I'm creating. And of course, in Power Pivot, I also have the ability to construct hierarchies just like I can in analysis services. Right, let's just go and load this up now. So I might just pretty this up really quickly, just to make it a little bit less ugly. So let's just get rid of the grids and headings. Let's just leave that as that. There we go. Just rename this as right. Let me just save this now. So let's just go and publish this up to SharePoint. So what I've got here is I've got a Power Pivot gallery. It's also a place where I store all of my BI reports. And there's lots of different ways I can display this data. You can see that at the moment I'm using a sort of a gallery view. You'll also notice that there are different types of reporting things in here. There's Power Pivot models, there's Power View reports, and there's also BI semantic models that I can connect to and create reports against. What I want to do is just load up my Power Pivot model that I created. So let's upload that. Let me just click refresh, do this one more time, see if this will work. Okay. All right, that's a bit of a shame. I'm afraid I'm going to be unable to show that. So what I was going to show you was the ability for me to create that report and bring back those pictures and use those as filters to interact with. What I want to do now is very quickly head back to what's coming. So what I've got here is Excel, the next version of Excel 2013. Now what's really exciting about that is that the Power Pivot technology and Power View technology are all coming within one place. What I'm able to do is I'm again able to go and create my Power Pivot model. So I'm able to go in and build my analytical workbook. I'll just wait for that to come back. So one of the other areas that one of the other things that's been happening is where all of our BI function is going. So what I wanted to do is just quickly explain what tools are being used and how what features that are being used and where to access them. If you want to access Power Pivot, Power View, there are two ways you can access that technology. You can access that via the Business Intelligence edition of SQL Server. That's new with SQL Server 2012. You can also access that with SQL Server Enterprise edition with 2012. And that's available in core-based licensing for the SQL Server Enterprise, and for Business Intelligence edition, it's available in Server Cal model. The reporting services, analysis services are still available in Standard Edition, but technology like Writeback, which I was showing you earlier, that's not available. You also have a whole series of other technologies available with the BI Edition and Enterprise that's not available with Standard, such as data quality services and master data services. Power View and Power Pivot, the best place to start is with the BI Edition if you're a small organisation. If you're a large organisation, you probably already have an enterprise license that you can use. And all the technology I showed you is fully supported under a virtual environment. So you may not necessarily need to stand up standalone stuff. You can actually leverage your private cloud solution. There's a whole series of blogs that are available on this. If you want to set up SharePoint with Power Pivot, Power View, and have that capability, the best place to start are the deployment planning guides for solutions for SharePoint. I thoroughly recommend you read the Kerberos Authentication Guide. But the best place to start, without a doubt, is engaging a gold certified partner. You may have access to what we call deployment planning days as part of your enterprise agreement. And they can come in and do an assessment and planning on how you could actually deploy this technology. And indeed, they could actually do proof of concepts. And we have some great gold partners here today. I know Intergens is around. We have about 8 gold partners in this space. That's Theta, Intergen, Datacom as well, Enlightened Designs, and Corp Consulting. We have about 8 partners that are all available. If you want to get hold of them, go to microsoft.co.nz SQL Experts, and you'll find a list of the gold partners there. Right. There are a huge number of BI sessions coming up. The one that I know this is the first day. The one that I just recommended for Nick Draper, the drilling down on multidimensional versus tabular, that's BI 306. I thoroughly recommend to go and see that. We also have a whole series of speakers from overseas. So I mentioned Peter Myers. He was here last week running the BI Academy. It was the first time we've run that. It was a great training course. We had fantastic feedback. He's also running a couple of sessions here at TechEd as well that I thoroughly recommend that you go and have a look at. Those of you who attended Pat Martin's session this morning, he's running a few more, one more later on this week. And I also thoroughly recommend that you go and have a look at the turbocharge your data warehouse with SQL queries and column stores. That's a really great way of optimizing and using the in-memory technology. Right, I am going to attempt to go back to my laptop and give away stuff for questions. So this is actually Power Pivot and Power View all coming together. And what you can see here is again my model that I've created in Power View, and I've created my Power Pivot, and I've created my little dashboard that I can interact with. What I'm also able to do is I'm actually able to create a Power View report against that Power Pivot model, all within the same Excel workbook. So I'm not necessarily putting it up on the server just yet. So this is a great way of prototyping that BI solution. I've got all of that animation and visualization that I have with Power View. I've got the ability to have the chart interactivity, but I also have something interesting that's coming with the next version of Power View and Power Pivot. I have the ability to expose geospatial information very, very easily. Now I'm going to attempt to build a report from scratch and show you how that works. So let's just get that started. So I'm just clicking on creating a new report. So first thing is I insert a blank sheet. And one of the things that I have with Excel 2010, with new Excel, is this new icon called Power View. So when I click on Power View now, what it's going to do is it's actually going to look at what data models are available, and it's found that there's actually already a Power Pivot model that's been created. So let me just go and create that report really quickly. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the sales from geography. So let's just say, let's take the number of, let's take sales from city level. Let's go and select the sales amount from the total sales table. And I'm just going to pull in the total sales amount. And so, okay, that's a pretty boring report. It's just a table. I could turn it into a bar chart, of course. Let's just do it as a cluster bar chart. Again, not very exciting. But what I can do now is I can actually turn that chart into a map. And what's really exciting is that because Power View can see that that city is actually a city and recognises a city, it can actually plot that on a map. It also can take longitude and latitude as well if we want to. And because it's using Bing Maps, we can actually drill right down to the individual street level. So let's just pop this right out, expand it out. And again, I can just completely drill down into where that actual sale was, that location, right down to the street level. And again, this is very exciting because it's a lot easier for the business user to work with that data. I'm just waiting for it to catch up. I have to apologise, the internet's a little bit slow. Now, I think this is something that's going to be really meaningful to a lot of business users, because if you think about reporting from a geospatial perspective, it's usually locked away in a separate tool that's not integrated with the BI tool that I'm working with. Now, all of that's integrated within Excel and all available for those business users to use. So I've now got 3 minutes to answer questions, and I'd like to open the floor up. So any questions from what I've shown you today? Yes? Does it handle spatial sets? So the stuff that I've seen is it's only really plotting a pin at the moment. It will do, it'll handle multiple sort of segments and stuff, but not a region. We do have shape files for regions that are available in Power View today. So it's just a matter of having those region shapes loaded in the BI semantic model. But as for sort of the topographical mapping that you see with some of the Bing stuff that we've done in Excel before, I haven't seen that today. But I'm going to give you a prize for that, so I'll give you a USB key for that. Cool. Any other questions? See how it works? I've got prizes. Right. I've also got a very, very good prize, one that I want to give away. Oh, yes. Hello. Yes, it can, but one of the things you would want to do is run the Upgrade Advisor. So what the Upgrade Advisor will do, and that's a fantastic question, by the way, will actually look at your analysis services cube, look at your implementation, and it'll indicate if there are any issues that you need to do as part of your upgrade. If you were asking if it was from Analysis Services 2000, we'd be having a different conversation. But since 2005, you can continue to upgrade pretty straightforward. I'm going to give you the mouse for that. Yes, hello.
What's the best way to deliver real time?
Yeah, great question. So Brian just asked, what's the best way to deliver real-time KPIs in real-time mode? There's actually lots of options around handling real-time data. Probably the one that I'm really interested in and using is a technology called Stream Insight. And what that's designed for is handling large amounts of data in real time and then presenting them back as KPIs. So if you want to have a look at that technology, that would be the one that I'd recommend. Yeah, thanks, Brian. Sorry. Yeah. Right, that's a great question. So just to qualify that a little bit, what version of SharePoint do I need to use Power Pivot and Power View? You need to have what we call the enterprise CAL for those users. So It has to be the SharePoint server and a SharePoint Enterprise Cal for those users using Power Pivot and Power View. Great. Any other questions? I'll give you an exam voucher for that. All right, well, thank you very much, everybody. I hope you enjoyed TechEd. Yeah, please fill out the evaluation forms, and I look forward to seeing you guys next year.